For Louisiana versus all y'all, Jarrett Roser here with Sam Spiegelman on what I think we're going to start calling Recruit That Boot. This is the first name drop of the potential new name for this little recurring recruiting show. And Sam, busy weekend. I was out in Orlando with the new Fleaux 7-on-7 team at OT7 Orlando, week 3. You were out in Dallas at the Rivals camp out there where some Louisiana guys were among some top performers. Let's kind of start there. Give us the update. It sounds like some guys that have become early MVPs of our recurring conversation were notables out there in Dallas representing Louisiana.
Definitely. Super excited to be back on Recruit That Boot, also possibly known as that Boot, Scoot, and Boogie. We'll leave that up to the listeners out there, obviously. It's still open to interpretation.
We'll let all 30 of you decide.
32 and counting. I mean, so here's my issue. I still haven't seen any of this on social media. I can't even retweet it. I think the guy running the account needs I don't know, maybe some pep in his but
I've gotten really bad. I've gotten really bad at keeping up with Instagram and Twitter. I get them on YouTube. I actually had our buddy Jordan Arsamont from LSU text me Monday about Zay Martin, who he's Zay's guardian up in Baton Rouge. Zay had a hell of a weekend with this Fleaux team. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But
definitely.
He texted me, "Hey, can you post this this video on Twitter?" I was like, "Yeah, Jordan, I promise you I'll get it out there at some point. This is as good a time as any to get back on top of the social medias, but everything's on YouTube for those that want to check out the channel." Anyway, we digress aggressively.
Of
Sam,
course.
Good weekend in Dallas. Go ahead.
Yes. Again, a lot of these same folks that we've been talking about. Let's start with the D-line MVP was none other than 2026 5-star Jakeem Stewart from St. Aug, coming off a visit to Oregon. So as we all know, that's not exactly the quickest plane ride, but for a 9 a.m. camp, Jakeem kind of came in. Obviously, he's a first off the bus kind of guy. We talk about his physical stature. Check out these numbers. He measured in at 6'5", 274 pounds, Jarrett. It's a guy that obviously has shown that he can play on the edge. But I think as he's getting to be an upperclassman, showing that he's probably more geared to play in as a 3 or a 4 gap, 3 or 4 tech. And of course, just an extraordinary 84-inch wingspan. I think it was no question the biggest in the camp. Some pretty crazy numbers for guys like Oklahoma linebacker commit Marcus James, who will get after the quarterback and stuff with 82-inch arms, which is pretty freakish. But Jakeem Stewart at 6'5", 274, 84-inch wingspan, 34.5-inch arms, built in a lab to just get after the quarterback. He had a couple of snaps off the edge, really made some noise in that capacity, but obviously did most of his damage using that length, using that power inside, working against interior guys where he's just a severe mismatch. But really, while Jakeem won the MVP, I thought someone who really put their name in that discussion as well was new Missouri commit Josh Lewis. We know he just committed to the Zoo over Tulane and Houston, which are obviously going to recruit him all the way until the end. And look for some of those official visits coming up beginning at end of May and June. But Josh really, I think this is the first time he's been in this setting, the last couple of weeks between Under Armour and then Rivals Dallas. And as he gets more accustomed, you're starting to see what these Missouri coaches, what all these coaches really like in Josh. He's super bouncy. He's super strong. He's really bendy, working at multiple spots like we just talked about with Jakeem. And as soon as he kind of finds, he's kind of a rhythm guy at these camps. Once he starts to win once, you start seeing him win more and more. And I thought he had a really productive day. And as he continues to get stronger and build out his frame, as long as he's able to maintain some of that balance that we're talking about, that that first step quickness, I think he's going to be really primed for a strong senior season, as we talked about time and time again. And then we'll cap this with Peyton Houston. Again, so the quarterback MVP was Kevin Sperry, who's going to be a senior at Denton Guyer up there in Dallas. Who is phenomenal and super precise, super accurate, for all the same reasons that we're about to talk about Peyton Houston, who was, I think, it's extraordinary. There were 3 quarterbacks I felt were worthy of being MVP. As we talked about, Sperry won that. Peyton Houston and 2026 quarterback Roman Seymour from the Houston area, which I think is extraordinary that obviously that a quarterback that young that has not started a varsity game yet. I'm a full believer. We talked about it on Sunday off air. obviously since we were in vehicles and planes and whatnot and 7-on-7 fields. But I just think I think he throws with such great anticipation. He throws well from the pocket. He throws well and accurately on the move. And we talked about that from a camp setting, being able to do that at the Elite 11, and then doing it again at Rivals Camp on air. But when there's receivers and DBs and he's trying to time his throws and put it on the money, he just does it so seamlessly. And I think that it's really hard to do. I think there are guys in the 2025 class right now that aren't up to the same level as Peyton Houston. I think there's guys, I think he's a notch above. So I can't even express the level of anticipation I have for his first varsity season as a sophomore over there at Evangel. I'm getting real estate out there in North Louisiana. I can't wait to see what that offense looks like with Peyton operating it. But enough about me. We talked about those guys at length. And of course, if you want to hear more about those guys, just check the YouTube channel, which Jared is going to tweet out this weekend for sure. I'll be on that. You were at OT7, and doing something that if anyone really loves Louisiana 7-on-7 in the history and when it was at its prime, it's that when Louisiana teams competed, they had the statewide talent from South Louisiana all the way up to North Louisiana. And I think you got to experience a little bit this weekend with the debut of Fleaux. Tell us a little about how that came together and what the experience was like this weekend.
Yeah, it was awesome. And one note too, the guys that you mentioned, you had the 25 and Josh, the 26 and Jakeem, 27 and Peyton, and then Roman Seymour from the Houston area, but has New Orleans connections. He's kin to McDonough 35 coach Frank Daggs, I think his nephew or maybe cousin or something, but
went to St. Aug with his dad, Roman Seymour Sr., or the second, played defensive end for Florida State and was recruited from St. Aug.
Yeah, and so that's my initial
awareness. Recruit that boot.
Yeah, my initial awareness of Roman was at, I think, LSU camp a couple years ago when Daggs kind of pointed me his direction, and he was impressive as a young guy and good to see him continuing to develop. But OT7 was awesome. I had never been to one of their events, and you watch from afar. There's a lot going on. It's the different actual 7-on-7 field, and there's the pit and all of this TV production and the props and stuff. And so from afar, there's some aspects that you feel like, this is kind of different to wrap my mind around. There's some goofiness to it and whatnot, but all of it is really fun for the kids. And when you get there, it is such a well-run event and everything is humming and organized, and there's no drama or BS like you see at some other events along the way around the country. And so that was really cool. And then the debut of Fleaux as a new Louisiana LSU super team was really cool because Louisiana has a level of talent to compete at the highest national levels in this format when everyone is together and on the same page, which through the years with more and more organizations popping up all over the state hasn't been the case. And so you have a couple of programs around the state that I think are pretty high level 7-on-7 programs, and they compete against one another and pull talent from one another. And then you have, smaller scale organizations where, maybe one guy stays here, two guys stay there because of different connections. And it makes it really tough to compete with these super teams from Florida, Texas, and California with the population bases they have, the resources they have flowing into those programs. And so really, I mean, Jimmy Smith, the founder of
the doer of things.
Yeah, the doer of things, who we obviously both worked with and for at different points with NOLA.com and with Rivals. He kind of got a lot of folks to the table to say, look, we know there's enough competition in this state that people maybe don't want to let their kids go play for the bootleggers on a certain weekend. But what if we build this collaborative, unified brand to go represent the state in a few major tournaments each year? And then that helped kind of get former bootleggers coach Ryan Clark back to the table to say, well, if I'm going to be able to coach all of the best guys from Louisiana, then I'll be interested in coming back in for, 3 or 4 weekends a year or whatnot. And so between the top Louisiana guys and some some guys with Louisiana ties, like a Julius Jones Jr. in South Florida, whose dad played for the Saints years back, and Julius, his first years of life were spent in New Orleans and has an affinity for the state. And some LSU commits and a Bryce Underwood, LSU targets, Shamar Akande, Kalik Lockett. The roster was loaded, and it took some growing pains, figuring some things out, finding a little bit of a sync and a chemistry on Saturday, but they turn around on Sunday and kind of catch fire, reach the semifinals, and just had trouble stopping a low pro team that's really tough in that format and has played together for years and practices together every week. But Bryce Underwood to Harlem Berry is a connection that LSU fans should have been extremely excited about all weekend long, for those 6 matchups that they played together, where you saw Harlem all over the place. Really looking like a high level receiver as a running back at his high school at St. Martin's. Bryce was up there among top quarterback performers I've seen from a high school guy, whether, on Friday nights in the fall or in 7-on-7 settings. Was just super impressive. And really, we only saw a portion of his game because he has some athleticism to him as well. But him as a pocket passer was remarkable to watch. It's going to be really fun to watch him get to college, and his connection with Harlem, with Teron Francis, another LSU commit, and on down the list, his connection with the youngster Julius that I mentioned, and Zay Martin, a guy who is a less heralded prospect right now out of Baton Rouge, but showcased what he can do and reminded folks of his potential. I think he's going to be a name that we hear a little bit more of throughout this offseason. It was a lot of fun, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. The defense is still kind of figuring itself out and working together. It's tougher to be cohesive on defense when you're meeting each other 3 hours before the start of the first game than it is kind of, finding some plays on offense. But a really exciting, I think, moment in general for this team to come together and have a lot of support from the different organizations within Louisiana, from guys like a Ryan Clark and a Bruce Eugene, who were, Louisiana football legends. Had the support of TD Athletic Foundation, a local nonprofit that helps support some student athletes in their athletic and academic endeavors. And so thanks to Trent Davis and company on that front, but just seeing everyone actually working toward the same direction in Louisiana on this format was really cool.
Well, the players I was going to ask you about, you already touched on them. So, I guess that's what makes you who you are, Jarrett. I did want to say, I wanted to kind of follow up then on Bryce. Is he a true number one not only number one quarterback, but number one player in the country caliber from what you saw? Because, again, being a Twitter watcher, an X watcher this weekend, what I saw someone who looked the part, like literally a 6'4", 200-something pound passer that could literally look like he was throwing darts out there, Jarrett. Second, I saw Harlem Berry catch some of the best passes out there, and we know what he is as a running back. So I did want to see if you could expound a little bit on his abilities as a receiver, and maybe should we be talking about him as a 5-star athlete? And then, my favorite thing about when Ryan was a coach with the Bootleggers, and I've talked to him about this, was his impact of just having meetings on the sidelines continually. I think about him at Gormley, bringing players to the side before, after, during, being very vocal. There's a lot of talented guys in that secondary, a lot of them young. And like you said, going against low pro is like going kind of against Midwest Boom. Is just very organized and structured and schemed, and it's hard to beat them. With all the talent, what kind of impact did you see from Ryan? And did you notice anything in particular that, from the weekend?
Yeah, I guess going through those in order, Bryce, Harlem, and Ryan. My first meeting of Bryce was at the Airbnb Friday night when our group from the New Orleans flight got in pretty late. And when we kind of crossed paths and he was a face that I didn't know of all of the Louisiana guys, I introduced myself. He said Bryce. It threw me off because he's a big kid. He's got that size for sure for the next level and beyond. And then the way that he carried himself, even when things were a little bit frustrating at times on Saturday, kind of figuring some things out, he was very upbeat. And just for a group of guys that were all meeting for the first time, I thought some of the intangibles that he brought given his stature, were really impressive, because obviously you can't take that for granted from some of these high profile prospects, but he had a lot of really good things from that standpoint. And then he made some incredibly impressive throws in tight windows. He took some shots and completed the vast majority of his passes, had the comeback against South Florida Express where he basically had, I think it was 15 or 20 seconds to get all the way downfield, and had a young receiver with a drop on the sideline of a perfectly thrown ball, went right back to the kid, completion, and then found Zay for the go-ahead touchdown with 6 seconds left. So his poise there, his trust in his teammates, and kind of making everyone around him better was really impressive. I don't see the full national scale quite the same way you do, so it's tough for me to say he's the number one guy without seeing as many guys, because I'm so hyper Louisiana focused. But I haven't seen I haven't seen a lot of high school prospects be as good as what I just saw from Bryce Underwood in a small sample size, obviously, and in a non-pads format and whatnot. And so kind of take it all for what it's worth. But I left a huge Bryce Underwood fan, more than I was from just what I had kind of seen from some film and whatnot of him previously. Similarly, Harlem Berry is a guy that I think you saw sort of a blueprint of what he can be in terms of an all-around playmaker, a guy that's going to excel in some spots as a running back, but as a threat, as a receiver in the return game. He had a play with some yak where he shook the hell out of a couple of guys. And again, they just have to get a hand on him in this format, and couldn't even reach to get a hand on him because he had so much wiggle to him after the catch. But you saw a really well-rounded game from a guy that I think I left the weekend more confident than ever that he's my number one prospect in the state of Louisiana, at least, and everything that he brings to the football field. And then for RC, I actually talked to him at one point this weekend to make sure that he understands how cool it is for the kids to learn from him, because a couple of the guys mentioned stuff to me after I posted pictures of them having some of those pregame conversations. And the focus of the photo was kind of on Ryan talking to a group of kids, but the kids were so excited to be in a photo with the guy that they watch on ESPN all week, every week, and on the pivot as a former Super Bowl champion. Yeah, he's one of the clear voices of football in America at this point. And so for them to learn from him and him to kind of sew back into this generation is something that clearly means a lot to them. And I think it's important for him to realize that when they may be a little bit shy to come out and express that, to just kind of funnel that back to him, because he really does do a great job of that. And then as we kind of wrapped up the weekend and are all heading off to go catch flights, he made a point to, whether it be a Bryce Underwood, that's a 5-star number one prospect in the country who's going to head to his alma mater at LSU, or anyone else on that roster, he told any kid that, came to say goodbye for the weekend and, thanks for everything, hey, make sure you take my number. Let me know if I can ever do anything for you, and just kind of keep that line of communication open. And so that's a part of Ryan that not everyone sees kind of behind the scenes. I know there were some points during, COVID times and different political and social stuff that some LSU fans got frustrated with Ryan and his stances on things at times, and still kind of hold that against him and don't know him on a personal level. But the way that he interacts with everyone around him and really cares for everyone involved in this, and particularly the kids, is really cool aspect of what he does. As someone of his fame and stature, and at this point wealth and all of those things.
I mean, I think he's been wealthy since he was in the league, but no, I'm such a big fan of Ryan. I think you and I both are. I think obviously his involvement from when Jordan was at U High, when his involvement with the Bootleggers, then from his involvement at his alma mater. Obviously, you and I have both been on that beat and seen him. When it's June 15th and it's 109 degrees outside, and he's out there. I remember him with the Amik and Justin battles from back in the day. Two guys that are still competing in the NFL to this day, and I thought it was so cool to see him. Obviously we talked about this initiative and being how rare it is to have all of Louisiana united, and what a better face. I don't think he could have done any better, especially with his experience there. And then again, just one more set of follow-up questions. What would you make of the chemistry between Bryce Underwood, the 5-star LSU commit, and Khalil Lockett, the 5-star receiver who is very high on LSU's board for this class. And then what do you think about this comparison for Harlem Berry? Not exactly the same skill set as Debo Samuel, but someone who literally can play receiver or running back at such a high level. I can't think of like how many people who act, maybe Christian McCaffrey, who also split. They're both on the San Francisco 49ers. So you see where I'm getting with the Shanahan offense and Harlem Berry being a first-round pick in a couple of years. But just that unique speed, they had elusiveness in space, the ability. I mean, I was so impressed with not only his route running, but, he's 5'10", 185 pounds, 190 pounds at best. For him competing for balls in 7-on-7, and when you're playing against schools against teams like SFE and Raw and you name it out there, those are 4-star DBs that are very good football players. So I was very impressed by those two. But what'd you make of that chemistry between Underwood and Lockett?
Yeah, it wasn't a huge weekend for Khalil. He took some time Saturday to work into some things. On Sunday, though, he had a critical reception on, I think it was a 4th down play from Bryce in that comeback against SFE, if I'm not mistaken. And so you saw a couple of moments what Khalil brings to the table, as well as the fact that Bryce has a level of trust in that in a key moment, because he really relied very heavily on Harlem, very heavily on Zay and Julius and Manchild. And Khalil was another guy that in some moments as the weekend developed, he knew that he could still go to for a play when they really needed it. And so I think that's encouraging for sure. And then we theoretically will see them together again in June for nationals. We'll see how all that goes. And then for Harlem, yeah, I think from a standpoint of not necessarily the same skill set, but a level of versatility and being able to do a lot for an offense, particularly in modern football, there's something to be said for that, because I really do believe that Harlem can be a high-level receiver as well as obviously a high-level running back and do a lot of different things. He wasn't a guy that was just out there, completely raw as a receiver. He was routing guys up, and everything wasn't short and then make plays after the catch. He had some really nice plays, deep, stretching things vertically. He had some nice plays in traffic where he tracked the ball really well, absorbed some contact, and still came down with big catches in the back of the end zone and found the ground, made sure that he was still in bounds. And so a lot of awareness of different, finer points to what he needed to do as a receiver that should be really encouraging in whatever role you ultimately want to see Harlem Berry in long term.
And what do you think about schools in the mix for Zay Martin? Where do you see as a good landing spot? I feel he's criminally underrated. I understand he's a little bit on the smaller size, about 5'10", 180 pounds, kind of like we're talking about. But kind of like you said, he shows up in big games. I mean, obviously, anyone who's seen him play for U-High knows that he's a very polished receiver, in spite of being a lack of size. I'm thinking, in my mind, someone in the state of Louisiana has got to come recruit him at U-High this spring. Am I crazy?
No, I agree completely. He's a guy that I've been interested to see where his fit was, and you mentioned the size component. I feel like he's at a point now where he has good enough size to play at some of these places, and obviously brings a lot with his skill set as a route runner and extremely reliable hands. And so watching how things develop after a weekend like this, where I had college coaches texting me after that SFE game, Zay Martin, that's all. And so I think you'll see some of these FCS schools for sure around the state come in more strongly, as well as some of these, D1 FBS group of 5 schools come into the mix. It should be a big spring football stretch that we're starting now, and then obviously camps in June. And I think Zay Martin is going to be a pretty notable stock riser here in the coming months.
La Tech, UL. What are we waiting on?
I don't think we're that far off from
I
one
don't
of
think
these
so.
one of these schools coming in.
I know there's a whole transfer portal component. I know that obviously, me and you barking at each other about it and me getting a little bit feisty is not going to do anything. But like Coach, I know it's only the spring, right? It feels like recruiting's over on May 1st. And nothing has really happened. The spring has to happen. Senior seasons have to happen. But La Tech, Coach Cumbie, UL, come on, Coach Bergeron, come on.
Look, and I'll kind of leave you with this before I go hop on radio with Sean Fox and company in a minute here. But this time last year, we weren't talking about LSU target Mike Turner Jr. That didn't come for
True.
another month or so, and then that
There's
was
still camp season.
a quick developing process for Mike, who now is going to be, I think, a key member of that LSU freshman class. And so a lot. It's interesting how much of a time crunch has become of the recruiting process for a lot of guys now, because so much moved up because of the early signing period and all these things. But then the transfer portal has led to a lot of college programs also holding off on some of the high school guys. And so it's really condensed a ton into this spring and the first couple of weeks of June for these guys preparing for their senior year. But yeah, man, hey, good conversation, right?
Hey, well, this is what happens when you let me steer the ship. It gets a little bit crazy.
We'll mix it up a little bit more moving forward. But again, I'm gonna hop on with Fox and Company here shortly. Sam, appreciate you as always chopping it up on Recruit That Boot, the new recruiting show for Louisiana versus all y'all.
See.